Hey guys, what is going on? This is your old pal CHH, and we're back today to do more facts from the Halloween Taking Shape book, which is right here. And again, this is such a great book. I'm having just such a good time reading this and learning new stuff about the Halloween franchise that I just never really heard about before, because some of this stuff is just like, it was never put in documentaries. I mean, granted, documentaries can only be a few hours long, and you know, this takes a while to read. At least takes me a while to read, and I'm taking it chapter by chapter, which is each entry. And today we're doing Halloween H20. If you haven't seen the previous episodes, please check those out. Those are all really cool. I think my favorite one I've done so far was probably Halloween 2 was pretty great. Halloween 2 episode was pretty great. But with that being said, this is 10 facts about Halloween H20. Let's not BS too much. Let's get right into it. Alright, so the first interesting fact about Halloween H20 is that Robert Zappia made a script for a direct-to-video movie titled Halloween 7, Two Faces of Evil, where, get this guys, a copycat killer kills a babysitter, and the police bury a dead Michael Myers after he died in prison, but then his body soon disappears after that. Reading that almost like gave me the willies, because I was like, oh my god, because of obviously what we know now is going on with the newest Halloween movie, and the fact that I read that for a treatment for Halloween 7 is just bizarre. So that obviously didn't get used, but Robert Zappia was brought in because initially they were going to make a straight-to-video Halloween movie. This is before I think Miramax knew that Laurie Strode was going to come on board. So initially they were like, let's just take this in a new direction, let's do something different. And that's what Robert Zappia came up with. Robert Zappia was a television guy. He worked on shows like Home Improvement and stuff, so this was going to be his soiree into feature film. So, wow. Can't believe that almost happened back then with what's going on now. And I have to wonder if they used some inspiration from maybe this draft. I don't know. Time will tell. Time will tell. Okay, so now it's been known that when Jamie Lee Curtis decided she wanted to do another Halloween film, she wanted Deborah and John Carpenter to become part of the team as well, and she wanted Deborah to produce and John to direct. And we all know that nowadays we hear that John just didn't want to do it. But in this book, it said that John actually met with Bob Weinstein, and not only that, Carpenter supposedly asks for $10 million to direct with a 3-picture deal from Miramax, which they refused. Now, maybe you could assume that maybe John just aimed the ball really high instead of just saying no, because he figured they would say no to a deal like this, and that was his way of telling them I'm not interested. But what if they would have accepted that, you know, and then maybe John would have had a 3-picture deal? I don't know. I don't know if John's ever actually disclosed that himself before, but that was what was reported in this book, and just fascinating. And I can believe it, because as we've seen now through previous episodes that I've done on this, John has made pitches for Halloween's 4 before, and Canon Pictures was going to try to get the picture with him before, and other times where they were going to do a Pinhead versus Michael Myers. So John, even though he left after part 3, ostensibly, he was making ideas throughout the years, you know, so just really telling. So I can totally believe that he did play hardball and won a lot of money to try to come back. Alright, so in some of the initial treatments that we got after everybody was on board that was supposed to be on board, and we got Jamie Lee Curtis back, in the initial treatments that Kevin Williamson had, it was supposed to be Rachel Loomis arriving home to see her office ransacked and the door jarred open, where Michael Myers eventually kills her and her neighbor friend Timmy. What we have in the movie now is the nurse from the first couple movies coming home, and it's basically the same scene, but in the initial versions, it was supposed to be Dr. Loomis's daughter coming home, which is interesting because you go back to what we talked about in the first episode where Donald Pleasance told John Carpenter, I don't have a family. If I'm this obsessed about my work, I have no time to get married or have kids. But in this movie, and it was nothing discussed in the film, this was behind the scenes, but it's interesting to note that in this film, his daughter was supposed to be arriving home where Michael Myers broke into her house looking for the files, and she kills her and the neighbor. So I can't say that I would have preferred that over what we have. I would just have to see it. I can't really judge what I can't see, but interesting nonetheless. Alright, so going back to the initial treatments for Halloween H20 when the film was becoming what it would become, there was a notion that Halloween's 4, 5, and 6 happened. And not only that, there was supposed to be a scene where Carrie Tate, Laurie Strode, has a moment where she's acknowledging that she had abandoned her young daughter when all the stuff started hitting the fan, and how she had to flee and go under the witness protection program. So they were initially not going to ignore everything. That's what ended up happening. Steve Miner was a big proponent of saying, let's not disclose this or that, let's just forget it, let's go back to basics and go that way. But it didn't start out that way. I mean, it started out being a fresh new sequel that was just going to go in a whole different direction with a copycat killer, which is just bizarre. But it was interesting to note that we didn't just go from 0 to 100. We started scaling stuff back and going back to the original series. But I don't know. This is something that fans have often debated and talked about. You know, 4, 5, and 6 can exist with the movie we have now, and others say no, it's clear that they can't. She didn't do this, she didn't do that. Well, in the original drafts, they did have a scene where she was having a hard emotional moment where she's acknowledging to herself, like, and reliving the fact that she had to abandon her young daughter to go into the witness protection programs. Would that have changed history? I guess it could have, because then Danielle Harris could have came back into the fold a lot easier, and things could have been a lot different, but that ended up getting cut, and they extensively just erased the history from 4, 5, and 6 with not talking about it or acting like it ever happened, just from Halloween 2 forward. So talking about the initial Kevin Williamson draft, again, we know now in the end of the film that Laurie Strode chops Michael's head off with an axe. Well, in Kevin's initial draft, Michael was supposed to get killed by a helicopter propeller. And he was supposed to get chopped up horribly. Kind of like when Chucky falls into that big, fan blade at the end. He was supposed to get chopped up like that. But you can take a wild guess at who was like, no, I don't think I want to do that. Mustafa Akkad. We know that Mustafa does not want him to be getting killed at all, and he basically didn't. Okay, so this was something that was very interesting to me. I believe this is the 6th fact we have on Halloween H20. A broadcast television version appeared on Fox TV in 2003, but has never been released on home video till this day. I don't know if maybe there's a bootleg version of it out there or a homebrew, but when I was reading about this, it just said that there were some extended shots, extended suspense moments throughout the film. There was an extended moment where Carrie Tate and her boyfriend, the other teacher, are getting ready to make out and stuff, and they're drinking, and she ends up telling them about Michael Myers for the first time, but they have a little, like, talking about family moments and stuff like that. That all was stricken in the theatrical print of the film, but apparently on TV they had to go a little bit longer because I think H20 is the shortest Halloween movie, so they had little bits and pieces that they put back into the film to extend it a little bit. I would love to see it. I don't know if it's possible to see, but apparently that's never been put on a home video release, which is interesting, and I don't know. I mean, I'd love to see it. I know that. But have you seen it? You let me know down below. Okay, so this was interesting. Up until a few weeks before shooting actually started, all the drafts for Halloween 7, or Halloween H20, had a very important detective character in this movie, which was supposed to kind of, not necessarily replace Dr. Loomis, but have a character that had that essence. And it was up until weeks before shooting, just a few weeks, they had the guy casted, they had an actor for the role, he was on set getting ready, and it was just a few weeks before that that Williamson said, we need to cut this, we need to just focus this on Laurie Strode and not have that in there. I guess, they had the Loomis voice in the beginning, and that's supposed to give the essence of Loomis's spirit throughout the film, so to speak, and maybe having a new detective type character would have felt cheap in some of the producers' eyes. I don't know. I think the producers actually liked it. I think it was really just Williamson, from what I read, that didn't like it and wanted to get rid of it. But when he suggested it, it sounded like everybody was like, yeah, let's do that. So that character was stricken just weeks before production started. Okay, so this was probably the coolest thing I learned about this. We now know that Mustafa did not want Michael to be killed at all. Kevin Williamson did. They wanted to kill Michael. They figured this is the last one, which is hysterical to think about. We need to do something special and do this with some finality and give the character of Laurie Strode, that moment that she deserves. Otherwise, why would she come back to this series? Why would she come back and do this film? The reason is money. But they needed to convince Mustafa so much that they weren't really killing Michael when they came up with the idea that Michael changed clothes with one of the EMT people, that the shot that you see in the opening of Resurrection, where you see the mask being pulled off, and it's that face, and that's the EMT guy that Michael traded clothes with. They shot that while shooting the principal photography of H20, where they're shooting that death sequence of Michael's head getting cut off. They shot that shot that you see in the beginning of Resurrection right then and there. And that way they had it on film so Mustafa could see it. That way he could believe for sure, because he was very paranoid. He felt, you got to remember, like, Halloween 6 was this horrible experience for the Akkads with Miramax and stuff. Now, while this film was a lot more streamlined and everybody got along for the most part on this one, Mustafa definitely felt like he couldn't trust anybody yet. So they had to film that right then and there and send it to him. That way he could see that they're acknowledging that it wasn't Michael, that heads got chopped off. And then they use it in Resurrection a few years later. Didn't know that? That is crazy, but that's really cool too. Okay, another cool thing about this was the scene in Halloween H2O where Josh Hartnett and his girlfriend are running from Michael, and there's that little gate in front of the door. Well, they close the gate and they're trying to open the door on the other side, where Laurie Strode ultimately gets the door open for them and brings them in. Well, that scene was inspired by Kevin Williamson having that actually happen to him in real life, where a burglar was chasing the two, him and Kevin Williamson and his friend, and they had a little gate in front of their door where their apartment building was, and they managed to get that gate shut, but they dropped their keys right then and there, and they were having trouble reaching for it, and that burglar started running towards them, but because they were screaming and things like that, the burglar ended up running away. But that's a scary thing to think about, because especially if you need the keys to open up the door behind you and you need to reach it, you're a sitting duck right there and you really can't do anything. Probably one of the best sequences in H2O, to be honest with you. And that doesn't surprise me, because a lot of the best stuff that comes in movies like this and horror movies are from real-life experiences or bad dreams people have. So I think that's cool, and it makes me appreciate that scene even more, quite frankly. Alright guys, so the 10th fact about H2O, this is something that big fans already know about, but I wanted to talk about this to clarify based on what I read in the book. Now, the Halloween 6 mask, everybody knows it was a train wreck. It was a disaster. There's multiple films in the mask. Now, I finally, when I read the book, everything started to gel a little bit more as to what happened. The Weinsteins loved the John Carl Buechler Halloween 6 mask. They wanted to use that for the film. We see that mask in the beginning of the film, which I love the mask, but I can see how, you know, Steve Miner hated it. He said, this doesn't look like the first movie. This doesn't look like it at all. What is this mask? So he started flat out refusing to shoot the movie with that mask on. And he had Stan Winston, who was a friend of Steve Miner's and was working on movies with Steve before and after, make a mask that we start to see that's kind of more of just like that flat white, bigger eye, no expression mouth that we get. I don't hate the H2O mask, but it's certainly not top 5 or anything to me, but we started to see that mask mostly throughout the film. Now, what kind of mask they used where the CGI mask happened, I was trying to figure out what mask was under there, but I couldn't really get a clear answer, but it was probably the H6 mask that maybe Steve Miner hated, and so they CGI'd over it. I don't know, but they all agreed in the book the CGI looks so awful they should have just used whatever mask was wearing, because they were told that the CGI mask was going to look really good because CGI had come a long way, but Patrick Lussier said when they saw it in editing, it was the worst thing they'd ever seen, and I agree. So the Weinsteins loved the H6 mask, and the director, Steve Miner, absolutely despised it. So it was a mess. But, you know, and most of you know that, but I wanted to just give a little bit of clarification in case you didn't know. So there it is, guys. 10 awesome facts about Halloween H2O. Not the most exciting episode. I no problem admitting that, because quite frankly, H2O was a fairly smooth operation with the exception of the masks and the very end, and even so, it never caused a stir. There weren't any fights breaking out. There wasn't producers getting kicked off of the set or anything like that. Man, could you imagine if Halloween had gone to straight-to-video? I necessarily am not against that idea, because I think a straight-to-video Halloween movie could be really cool, and you could go in new directions that you couldn't do theatrically, and really explore new territory, which is that draft, the initial draft of the Copycat Killer, which is just mind-blowing considering that's what we're getting next. So to what extent in the new movie, of course, I don't know yet, but I mean, everybody and their grandma knows that now, that there's supposed to be this copycat person in the movie, so that'll be interesting. So interesting. But there it is, guys. 10 awesome facts about Halloween H2O. I hope you enjoyed that. Let me know what you might have learned from this episode, and get ready for Halloween Resurrection. We'll get to that very soon, and then we'll do the Rob Zombies, because I believe those are in this book too. So thank you for watching. This is CHH. Catch y'all later. Thank you to all my supporters on Patreon. To get behind-the-scenes photos, videos, and music, you can subscribe to my Patreon for as little as $1 a month.